No other nation in the world can tie its history and cultural identity as closely to another species as Mongolia. In Mongolia's case, this species is the horse. From the first domestication efforts dating back to 1400 BC to the conquest of Genghis Khan, horses have supported the establishment and maintenance of the Mongol Empire in a variety of ways. And today, it is no surprise that Mongols continue to be known as the world's best horsemen. As I'm sure you can imagine, the topic of horses in Mongolia is vast in nature, which is why our presentation today will focus on four main areas. Firstly, we'll take a look at the history of horses in Mongolia, investigating in more detail the domestication efforts of the horse, the original Mongolian horse species, as well as Genghis Khan's messenger system. Then we'll move into the present, taking a quick look at both the Nadam Festival and the Mongolia Derby, before moving into the literature section, where we'll briefly discuss three of the readings that we have touched upon in class, and taking a quick look in the future of what Mongolia has in mind for its further domestication of the horse. It is widely known that horses can be tied closely to the origins of the Mongol Empire. But when did all of that really start? And would Mongolia be the same if it hadn't been for the horse today? While the origins of the domesticated horse continue to be unknown in the world today, we can comfortably tie back the origins of the Mongolian horse to at least 1400 BC with the help of this excavation site that dates back to the Bronze Age. We have talked in plenty how Mongolia is the dream of any archaeologist due to its natural conditions. And this is also the case for this site, which contains not only deer stones, which are stones with very intricate carvings that show the value of the horse in Mongolian daily life, but contain the skeletons of at least 1,700 horses closely intermingled with human remains, showing us a close relationship between horses and humans even back then. Now we might ask why horses assume such a prominent position compared to other animals in ancient Mongolia. Well, we've before talked about the 5 snots of lifestyle, but one thing that we didn't talk about is that these snouts aren't created equal. In fact, horses were seen as the animal with the highest form of prestige, not only because they were used to herd the other animals, but largely because they served as a basis for all transportation and communication systems between nomadic tribes. But these weren't just any horses. In fact, they were a particular breed that was only native to Mongolia. The Taki horse is smaller and more sturdy than other horses that we might see in America or other countries in the West. These horses had incredible levels of endurance and are able to travel as much as 80 or 100 miles a day through all kinds of terrain, from water through mountains to steppes and desert. The name Taki can loosely be translated to spirit, and it was widely believed that if a hero dies, he or she will ride to heavens on horseback. But not just heroes or warriors traveled by horseback, but in fact the most common riders of the Taki horse were messengers. It is believed that Genghis Khan's messenger system employed as many as 50,000 horses simultaneously at its height. These horses connected Genghis Khan's entire empire, and it is safe to say the Mongolian Empire would have never been the same if it hadn't been for this postal service on horseback. Now we know that the history of Mongolia is closely tied to horses. However, if we believed that horses ceased to be important after the downfall of Genghis Khan's empire, we'd be horribly mistaken. In fact, large parts of Mongolia's cultural life today continue to be surrounded by horses. One particularly important instance of Mongolian culture today is the Nadam Festival, which is the modern reiteration of the 3 manly games, consisting of wrestling, archery, and horse racing. The festival takes place in summer, and people from all around the country come to the outskirts of Ulaanbaatar to compete and spectate in this amazing festival. Important to note is that while it is called the Manly Games, the games are not exclusively for men anymore, as archery and horse racing attract female athletes, and horse racing in particular actually attracts children. Jockeys between the ages of 5 and 13 compete to race between 10 and 17 miles through difficult terrain. Around 1,000 horses from all around Mongolia compete in this race that is meant to measure not the ability of the rider, but test the strength of the horse. It is interesting to point out that the riders often choose to ride bareback, as this is the traditional way that horses are ridden in Mongolia, and riders claim to feel closer to the horse that way. As these children are very young and engage in a very difficult task, it is no surprise that it is often said that Mongolian children learn to ride before they can walk, showing us once more how closely Mongolian culture continues to be tied to their horses. While participation in the Nadam festival is exclusively reserved to Mongolians, another horseback riding event has attracted international attention over the past few years. Created in 2009, the Mongolia Derby is known as the longest and most difficult horse race in the world, imitating the messenger system under Genghis Khan. In this race, the 50 international riders are given just 10 days to ride 1,000 kilometers along an unmarked and difficult path. These riders not only have to find their own route through the Mongolian wilderness, but they have to hit checkpoints along the way to trade their horses in every 40 kilometers. Despite the fact that only one person can formally be declared the winner of the race, all participants that cross the finish line are generally considered winners, as only about half of all participants finished a race that is so physically and emotionally taxing that it has attracted media attention from all around the world. Given the vast importance of horses in Mongolian history, it is no surprise that we find extensive accounts in literature that point towards the important relationship between horse and men. On this slide, I have listed 3 examples of readings that we did in class that are closely tied to the importance of the horse in Mongolian culture and history. In the interest of time, we will only touch upon each one of them very briefly. Firstly, The Secret History of the Mongols describes the 3 manly practices as well as the relationship between man and horse that are the foundation of today's Nadam games. Then we can see the example of Hurlhan as being representative of the role of Mongolian horses in the heroic age as it is described in Mongolian epics. Finally, to round up our account of the different genres that all touch upon horses, I want to point out some of the short stories that we read in class. For example, The Two White Things, which includes not only personification of the horse's main character, but also honorable characteristics that are usually associated with horses in Mongolian history. Now that we've talked about the past, present, and literature of horses in Mongolia, one question remains to be answered. What will happen next? As the president of the Mongolian National Association for Conservation of Nature and the Environment points out, there can be no Mongolian future without Mongolian horses. While the number of horses in Mongolia has significantly decreased since the time of Genghis Khan, there are still 3.6 million horses in Mongolia, which is more than there are people. This puts Mongolia at the very top of the international ranking of horses per capita, a rank that the Mongolian government not only wants to maintain, but further build out. The Mongolian horses today continue to be as sturdy as they were in the days of Genghis Khan, taking temperature differences of as much as 130 degrees Fahrenheit between summer and winter, living outside by themselves. Unfortunately, however, the number of horses that weather these conditions has become very low over the past years, as only about 400 taki horses are left in the wild. Fortunately, however, international conservation efforts have managed to keep this breed from extinction, as international breeding programs are trying to repopulate the steppe. It is Mongolia's goal that soon enough the Mongolian horses can once again gallop across the Mongolian wilderness, taking back the land that has always been their own.